So long as poor Blue Origin thrives on staying relevant in the space race, it will continue to face unprecedented engine failures since it seems they operate in the case of trial and error before getting the engine running. Because of their case, it seems they love to see the engine failure before taking note of faults and making corrections with other engines during the manufacturing phase, but before the manufacturing gets to this stage, millions of dollars might have been lost on testing one or two about the engine. So, what's actually wrong with Blue Origin? Why have their rockets blown up mercilessly just at the testing stage? Please stick with us as we discover all this in this video. From the look of things, Blue Origin's impatience about launching rockets into space doesn't seem to be just about the company alone, but maybe about who does it best. It appeared likely that two dragons of the space industry, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, would now compete for supremacy in space. Bezos has yet to advance with the same strength of character shown by his leadership of Amazon towards the Blue Origin, which is still far from being self-sufficient. Even as one of the wealthiest men in the world, Bezos still needs to invest more than $1 billion in the Blue Origin each year to keep the company alive. Jeff Bezos will eventually run out of time to stop Blue Origin's failures with this kind of financial support, and that's maybe. But we're not saying that Bezos and Blue Origin haven't smelled success in the space race before now. In fact, they have countless times. But we're saying that their failures are much higher than the number of rocket successes they've reached. In fact, dating back, Blue Origin accomplished a feat by successfully landing the brand new Shepard rocket and the capsule up and down a suborbital mission. This was the first time in history that any space country or company could launch a first-stage rocket into space in a vertical position before safely returning it to Earth. But in 2015, SpaceX launched a feat that was more valuable by successfully landing its orbital Falcon 9 rocket. Technically speaking, the Falcon 9 landing made much more sense because it took a lot more energy to lift a payload into orbit and involved a lot more energy to bring the booster back to the landing site. After the Falcon 9 flight, Jeff Bezos jokingly tweeted to Elon Musk of SpaceX, "Welcome to the club." Musk was obviously not amused, but his tweet highlighted the growing rivalry between Bezos and Musk, two billionaires competing to build reusable rockets to transform the space industry. The 21st century space race was supposed to be led by Blue Origin and SpaceX. It would be an incredible spectacle to watch, but it hasn't been because both companies are still learning the ropes of a rocket launch and none is perfect yet. Let's flash back our mind and talk about the last Blue Origin rocket failure when the main engine on the new Shepard booster appeared to cut out about a minute after liftoff from West Texas. However, it was the new Shepard's first launch failure. Fortunately, after firing an abort motor to escape the broken booster, the crew capsule, carrying NASA-funded experiments but no crew members, safely landed under a parachute. Blue Origin's launch facility is located north of Van Horn, Texas. The company's live broadcast showed the rocket taking off there. A minute after liftoff, as the rocket approached supersonic speed, a single hydrogen-fueled BE-3 engine powered the 60-foot tall or 80-meter booster off the launch pad after a nearly hour-long delay. At an altitude of about 8,500 meters, the BE-3 engine's exhaust flame appeared to change in color and shape, and the power plant then seemed to shut down, causing the rocket to tilt. The 4-ton crew capsule spun around and tumbled after the solid field abort motor on its bottom briefly fired, propelling the craft hundreds of feet away from the new Shepard rocket, guided by reaction control system thrusters. The abort motor delivered an instant pulse of 70,000 pounds of thrust to push the craft away from the failing rocket. Its motion stabilized as the capsule deployed 3 drogue parachutes and 3 main chutes for a comparatively gentle descent to the surface. After the incident, Erica Wagner, Blue Origin's payload sales director, said that it appears we have experienced an anomaly on today's flight that was unplanned and we don't have any details yet, but our crew capsule were able to escape successfully. The mission's experiment payloads were saved by the unplanned in-flight abort, but one of Blue Origin's 2 operational suborbital New Shepard boosters, which carried its own research payloads, was lost in the launch failure. This was the 9th flight of the booster, which is one half of the launch system and includes a capsule. The craft fired soft landing thrusters before touching down on the desert floor in West Texas about 5.5 minutes after liftoff. The emergency escape system worked as intended, quickly detaching the spacecraft from a rocket explosion. If a crew had been on board, they would have felt a strong jolt and gravitational forces before landing. The crew's absence was fortunate because the capsule was experiencing extreme G-forces and would have been a terrifying ride, and not pleasant one at that. Wow, did those landing thrusters actually fire on landing? Sure looked like a hard landing. The good aspect of this was that the escape worked just as it was designed. Even if it was a rough ride, it was at least survivable. To really scrutinize this, who among these space forerunners are really taking the space race serious, comparing a day in the life of Jeff Bezos and that of Elon Musk, and even their work ethic? To be sincere, Musk will famously sleep on the factory floor when needed and has stated that he needs 4 to 5 hours of sleep, affecting his productivity. On the other hand, Bezos said in interviews that he is consistently getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night. He doesn't seem to lose sleep over anything, not to mention checking through what's going on in Blue Origin. However, he left most of his responsibilities on the desk of his CEO Bob Smith, so some cultures will be neglected in Blue Origin. But surprisingly, Blue Origin was finally awarded the contract to launch the ULA into space amidst all of the company's failures. ULA is a partnership between the top Pentagon contractors Boeing and Lockheed Martin. Since 2000, ULA has launched its Atlas V heavy rocket about 80 times using the Russian-made RD-180 engine. The most recent statement from the US Space Force is promising because Blue Origin's BE-4 engine appears to be ending this reliance. After Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, Congress demanded a replacement for the Russian engines, setting the stage for the BE-4. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia in February of this year made that demand even more urgent. The most recent update from the American Space Force is also optimistic for Blue Origin, which had one of its missions forced to abort after launch on September 12th for technical reasons. Its suborbital New Shepard rocket, which lacks a BE-4 engine, was used to launch that mission. ULA claimed in its statement that the Vulcan program has now set its sights on finishing that BE-4 qualification tests and flight engine deliveries. The final qualification testing of other components is being completed to support initial launch capability. By March 2023, the US Space Force expects to have finished the initial certification of the Vulcan rocket powered by the BE-4 engine. The largest and the most stressful national security missions are not envisioned to receive final certification until 2025. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's SpaceX recently received final approval to use its Falcon Heavy rocket to launch the same kinds of sensitive, highly classified missions that ULA hopes to launch with Vulcan. While Vulcan can jettison its BE-4 engines for later reuse, SpaceX will use its Falcon Heavy rocket with reusable boosters. ULA and Blue Origin have done a lot to reduce risk, but a lot of work and testing persists in meeting this December's launch, according to Frank Calvelli, the Air Force's Assistant Secretary for Space Systems. Nevertheless, we hope it succeeds. Maybe if Jeff would work and get dirty with his engineering and science team's BO would be more successful, and no, we don't expect him to sleep on the factory floor. Just stop getting in the way of progress by suing his competitors when he loses a contract. Yeah, Jeff doesn't like losing, but he reminds us of one of those spoiled rich kids who cried and had a temper tangent when they were beaten black and blue on the playing ground until he got his participation trophy. How about Blue Origin finally becoming successful with every rocket launch? Do you think the company will surprise us in our sleep? There is also information about Blue Origin's engine problem and the huge capsule that blasted away from booster during launch. Click on the video to know more about this.